About the most pressing issue in the modern medicine, that is antimicrobial stewardship. As we all know, the advent of antibiotic was one of the most important medical advances in medical field that drastically reduced the mortality in infectious diseases. However, these very tools that revolutionized the medicine are now under the threat of antimicrobial resistance because of the indiscriminate use, overuse, and today we will explore the possibility of responsible antibiotic use, that is defining the role of each of us in preserving these life-saving drugs. Antimicrobial stewardship is not just about reducing the prescriptions, it is about the responsible prescription writing, which involves each one of us. And to preserve these antibiotics can benefit the patient, as not much of newer antibiotics are in pipeline, and we are about to finish the newer antibiotics. So today's PGCR is about AMSP, that is Antimicrobial Stewardship Program. The moderator for today's program is Dr. Major Shilpi, and she is from the Department of Microbiology. And the chairperson are Dr. Ved Prakash from the department, as he is the HOD of Department of Microbiology, and Dr. Anusha Vora, she is the HOD of Pharmacology. Over to Dr. Shilpi. Sir, that was not in PGCR, so that we are targeting about PGCR and to target the PG students in specific.
Good morning, everyone. Myself, Dr. Major Shilpi Gupta, Assistant Professor in the Department of Microbiology and Infection Control Officer, and I will be talking about the background and objectives of the program. So when we talk about antimicrobials, it includes all. It includes antibacterial agent, antiviral, antiparasitic and antifungal. But this program basically focuses on the use and the restriction of the antibacterial agent. So we will be sticking to that. So talking about the history of antibiotics, it goes beyond in 1928 when penicillin was the first antibiotic which was discovered by Alexander Fleming. It came into human use since 1942 and it was widely used in World War II. And in 1947, it was the first time when the resistance against penicillin was identified. So we see the timeline of the antibiotic development. The majority of antibiotics have been developed since 1990. And since then, the development of new antibiotics has slowed down significantly. The recent antibiotics which are developed, they are either very costly or they are not available in India. And the problem with the antibiotics is the moment they are commercialized, the bacteria they develop resistance against them. So presently, actually we are in a post-antibiotic era. When we see the causes of development of antimicrobial resistance, the two main causes of its development are either overprescription, overuse, or inappropriate or misuse. The other being the failure to implement the available diagnostic tests to reach the early diagnosis and increasing the rate of hospital-acquired infection due to poor infection control practices. But apart from the human use, the majority of the antibiotics are being used in the animals. And the problem is the consumption of maximum antibiotics is in animals and in livestock. So this is a problem globally as well as in our country. If we try to understand how does this resistance develops, we can understand by the selective pressure theory. In a bacterial population, the majority are the susceptible strains and very few are the resistant bacterial strains. So when the patient is given antibiotic, the susceptible ones are killed and we are left with the resistant bacterial flora. So what happens with continuous bacterial antibacterial exposure, the population of the resistant flora, it overwhelms and the overall resistant strain flourishes in an area of high antimicrobial use. And this mechanism is actually applicable to both humans as well as in animals. So once the resistance develops, how does it spread in the environment? So again, it's a vicious cycle. If we see a human carrying a resistant bacterial strain, it can spread to other people in the community and in the hospital by poor sanitation facilities or poor infection control practices. And from animals, these resistant flora, they can again come to or circulate in the human through either unproperly cooked meat or to the fertilizer or water containing the animal feces which reaches into the crop. So either the vegetarian population or the non-vegetarian population, this resistant flora circulates in all. So the recent UN report has labeled AMR as a silent pandemic, and it is estimated that by 2050 the majority of the deaths would be attributable to AMR, exceeding all other causes of the communicable and non-communicable diseases. And in India, it's again a very big issue because India has already been labeled as the largest consumer of antibiotics, exceeding China and US, and the gene which codes resistance against the colistin is already circulating in our country. So to tackle the issue, WHO has come up with the Global Action Plan, and based on which Indian Ministry has also adopted or developed its own National Action Plan, and under which the NMC has issued a letter recently to all the medical colleges, and they have instructed to form a committee and to carry out the training of the healthcare professionals on the best practices of antibiotic usage with the help of the module which they have developed. It's an integrated approach in which resides on 3 pillars. The most important part is the antimicrobial stewardship program, infection control practices, and supply of quality medicine. So sticking to our topic of antimicrobial stewardship program. So why is it necessary or why is it required? We had already discussed because of the rising problem of AMR. What it is to understand simply, it is just the optimized use of the available antimicrobials by clinical, microbiological and pharmacological approach without causing harm to the patient. And it is done following NAP-AMR strategies, in which one of the most important strategy is to improve awareness and understanding of AMSP through education. And every healthcare professional who uses antimicrobials is responsible, though it is facilitated and audited by the AMSP committee. So an ideal AMSP committee consists of the infectious disease physician, who is the leader of the team, and the other members are clinical pharmacist, pharmacologist, clinical microbiologist, infection control team, and the IT system. So finally, this particular PGCR, we have tried to discuss the basic aspects of practicing AMSP in our day-to-day practices. So it will be covered under 4 main headings: so principles of prescribing antibiotics, taking the examples of case-based approach, diagnostic stewardship, and finally the pharmacological parameters. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Devendra to continue the discussion.
Good morning, respected teachers. I am Dr. Devendra Singh from Department of General Medicine. Today I will be discussing about the clinical approach to the prescribing antimicrobials. While prescribing the antimicrobials, we follow START, SMART and FOCUS strategy. In the START, SMART, we assess the patient for the evidence of the infection on the basis of the history, clinical features, examination, rapid diagnostic, and based on which comply with the institutional guideline or antibiogram, we prescribe appropriate drug to appropriate dose, route and frequency. In the second component, focus component, we clinically review the patient after 48 to 72 hours. After 48 to 72 hours, we clinically reassess the patient, culture reports and final diagnosis. Based on we make a decision on a antibiotic, to stop antibiotic or de-escalation, IV to oral switch or continue the antibiotic. Whatever decision we made need to be documented. So general principle of personal prescription is that use antimicrobials only. When the high degree of suspicion of infection, empirical therapy was started. After the infection has been recognized, a definitive therapy was started, and the prophylactic therapy was started for the prevention of the infection in the special situation like the HIV patient and the surgical. Do not use antimicrobials to treat the colonization and the contamination except in the immunosuppressed or the post-splenectomy patient as a general prophylaxis or the feel-good effector to treat the infection which have a high suspicion of viral causes such as the influenza. So, golden rule of antimicrobial prescribing is the MIND, microbiology guided therapy wherever possible. Indications should be evidence-based, narrow spectrum prescribed, dosage and drug appropriate to the site and the type of the infection, minimize duration of therapy and ensure monotherapy in most cases. The fight is to prescribe the antibiotics. Is the first is the clinical diagnosis. Based on the clinical diagnosis, we prescribe the appropriate drug to appropriate dose and duration. And after 40 to 72 hours, make a decision on the de-escalation stop or IV to oral switch on antibiotics. Sir, after 40 to 72 hours with the culture reports, we make a decision on the de-escalation. स्टार्टिंग में जो एंटीबायोटिक स्टार्ट की थी उसके बाद उसको अगर नीड है या नहीं है.
Good morning to all the respected dignitaries. I will be discussing the case-based practical approach in prescribing the antimicrobials. So we have three objectives. First one is the making a clinical diagnosis. Second is choosing the empirical antibiotic and the de-escalation approach. First we see the objective of making a clinical diagnosis. So we have a case of 45-year-old male came with chief complaint of fever, cough and weakness since last 2 days. On physical examination, patient has pharyngeal edema and tonsillar edema. For diagnostic workup, we have sent the CBC. So based on the history and examination, what should be the probable diagnosis of this patient? Anyone? Yes. And should we give antibiotic to this patient? So based on the history and throat examination, it's suggestive of acute pharyngitis. Now the most common causes of acute pharyngitis in adults are viruses. So there is no use of antibiotics. Now what are the key learning points from this case? So making a clinical diagnosis based on history and thorough clinical examination is most important. A clinical diagnosis helps in selecting the right test for the right patient and also helps to predict the common causative organisms. So now we see the last two objectives. We have a case of 45-year-old male came with chief complaint of fever, left flank pain and dysuria from last 2 days. Patient is a known case of diabetic mellitus type 2. On physical examination, patient has hypotension, tachycardia and bilateral costovertebral angle tenderness. For diagnostic workup, we have sent CBC, renal function test, urine routine microscopy, USG whole abdomen with pelvis. And as the patient appears to be in sepsis, we have sent the blood and urine culture on the first day. So based on the history and examination, our provisional diagnosis will be acute pyelonephritis. So now as discussed by Dr. Devender, what is the clinician-patient encounter? It has two parts. First is the initial evaluation in which we clinically assess the patient, send the diagnostic workup and take the therapeutic decisions. Now after 48 to 72 hours, we clinically reassess the patient and review the data we receive from the microbiological department and modify the antimicrobials. So in this patient, what therapeutic decision we need to take? So which empirical antibiotic needs to be started depends on the following parameters. First one is the severity. As our patient appears in sepsis, so the timing of starting the antibiotic is become very critical. We have to start the intravenous antibiotic within the 1 hour. Next is the source. As in our case, the likely source is urinary tract. So, and the common etiological pathogen in urinary tract is E. coli. Next is in drug resistance, we have to ask the patient for any recent antimicrobial use or any previous hospitalization. For patient factor, we ask for the allergy or any renal or liver dysfunction. So this is the antibiogram prepared by our microbiological department based on the positive culture reports, which is prepared annually and which is specimen, organism and department wise. So we have this annual antibiogram which is from our institute of from April 2023 to March 2024. Usually we follow this color coding system in which we tend to select the antibiotic for empirical use. The choice can be made from green or yellow colored antibiotic. Ideally, if the patient is critical, we need to tend to choose from the green color antibiotic. While if patient is stable and OPD patient selection can be made from the yellow coded antibiotics. So this is the antibiogram of last year of our institute, which shows the most common organism is E. coli in the urine isolate from the adult medical ICU. Depending on the patient's criticality, we can select from the either yellow or green. So to summarize our case, we have a 45-year-old diabetic male which have features suggestive of sepsis, and there is no history of previous hospitalization or any antibiotic intake within the last 3 months. And we have a report of our local antibiogram. With all these, we choose the empirical antibiotic injection meropenem, 2 gram stat followed by 1 gram IV 8 hourly. Now the second part comes for the subsequent re-evaluation after 48 to 72 hours. Then the culture report will be available. So we need to review the microbiological data in which we see the culture report, and next is we assess the spectrum in terms of clinical condition of patient, and we decide whether we want to de-escalate the antibiotic, discontinue, or we want to escalate the antibiotics. We also have to see for the any adverse effect, and also at this point of time, based on the final diagnosis, we will decide the duration of therapy. So as we will see in this culture report, patient is sensitive, E. coli is sensitive to piperacillin tazobactam. So we can consider the de-escalation in this patient for injection piperacillin tazobactam. So the key learning points from this case is empirical therapy is to be decided based on the provisional diagnosis considering the local antibiogram. We have to review or modify the antibiotics based upon the culture report. De-escalation approach if local AMR pattern is high or patient is critically ill. We have to consider the de-escalation approach as early as possible. Now I would like to invite Singh Kapil from the Department of Microbiology to take us further.
Thank you, Dr. Gajan. Good morning, everyone. Today I will discuss about diagnostic stewardship. Diagnostic stewardship is appropriate use of microbiological diagnostic to guide therapeutic decisions. It has 4 T's: choosing the right test, right type of sample, collecting it at the right time, and in order to guide the right treatment decisions. I will discuss about 3 objectives. So what is the importance of, first objective is what is the importance of ordering the right test. So we have a case of 45-year-old female with no comorbidities diagnosed with cystitis 3 weeks ago. She was treated, now asymptomatic, came in OPD for follow-up. So I would like to ask the audience, should she submit repeat sample for urine culture? However, she submitted a urine sample for routine microscopy and culture. Urine culture yield insignificant colony count of E. coli.
Here I would like to emphasize the importance of treating old ladies having culture report positive with E. coli insignificant. Kindly do not treat these patients with antibiotics if they are asymptomatic. This is normal sort of bacteria in that particular patient. If they live and they do not cause any symptom or sign or any causes. Am I right or wrong?
The urine microscopy is also important. First cells that protect. Even if first cells are there, because to have a granular cytoplasm, first cells might be there, E. coli bacteria might be there in the culture, but the patient is absolutely asymptomatic.
Certain conditions available where asymptomatic bacteria we should treat. Otherwise,
Which conditions, right?
So pregnant women, patient undergoing urological procedures like transurethral resection.
Pregnant patient, if she is not having any symptoms, why should you treat? Ask her to take lot of water, lot of fluids.
So there is a higher evidence of
Preterm labor and pyelonephritis.
the patients who are going for neurological surgery,
Like a transurethral recession of prostate.
these bacteria can go outside.
Okay.
So when to collect urine for culture? Only when urinary tract infection is clinically suspected, as contaminated bacterial culture or asymptomatic bacteriuria are common. So however, there are certain conditions where we need to treat asymptomatic bacteriuria. Those are pregnant women, patient undergoing urological process like transurethral resection of prostate, neutropenic patient, renal transplant recipients. Our next the objective is what is the importance of proper sample collection. We have a case of a 62-year-old male with diabetes mellitus presented with painless ulcer, purulent discharge on right foot. Since 15 days, first swab was collected superficially and sent for culture sensitivity. Culture yield polymicrobial flora. So as no decision could be made, a repeat sample was collected after taking appropriate steps. Now culture yield methicillin sensitive Staphylococcus aureus. and patient treated according to antimicrobial susceptibility testing. So correct method of sample collection is necessary to yield correct pathogen in culture. So key learning point to remember in this case is swab is not an appropriate or preferred sample for culture, as it usually yield multiple bacteria which could be skin commensal and colonizer flora. Golden rule for pus specimen collection is obtain specimen from deepest layer of wound as much as possible.
पॉलीमाइक्रोबियल फ्लोरा की रिपोर्ट आए तो यूजुअली सस्पेक्ट कंटामिनेशन कंटामिनेशन
Another important point of appropriate sample collection is wash samples should not be sent for culture. At all these are Foley's catheter tips, endotracheal tube tips, urine from the bag of catheterized patient, as they will yield colonizer flora. Now last objective is how to differentiate between contamination and colonization from infection. So a positive culture report could represent either contamination, colonization, infection. So contamination is exogenous microorganism introduced into a specimen while collection of sample. Colonization is harmless commensal microorganism, and infection is presence of pathogen. So this is a case of 21-year-old female with fever since 3 weeks. She has abdominal tenderness, hepatomegaly. A set of blood culture bottles was collected. One bottle yielded Staphylococcus epidermidis and other was sterile. So in methodology of blood culture is critical in blood sample collection. We have to take proper aseptic precautions to avoid skin contaminants. While taking blood sample for culture, we have to collect adequate blood volume, as more blood culture greater the chance of recovering a pathogen, ideally 20 ml in adults and 1 to 5 ml in pediatric group. We have to take blood from two separate venoculture sites in help to reduce the risk of contamination and positive results. Ideally, we should take blood sample before start of antimicrobials. So these are the list of usual pathogens and contaminants which we encounter in our blood culture reports. Pathogens are gram-positive cocci like Staphylococcus aureus, Anticoccus faecium, gram-negative bacterioles like E. coli, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Probable contaminants are coagulation-negative Staphylococci, Staphylococcus epidermidis, Staphylococcus hemolyticus. So now, how to interpret blood culture? So in a blood culture set, there are 2 blood cultures bottle. If one bottle out of 2 bottles yielded pathogen, we consider it as a pathogen, irrespective of what other bottle yielded. If one blood culture bottle yielded contaminant and other was sterile, then it is usually a contaminant. And if both blood culture bottles yielded contaminant of same species, it could be pathogenic in immunocompromised patients, and clinical correlation is required. So next case is a 35-year-old male in the ICU on ventilator. An endotracheal aspirate was collected for culture, which yielded Acinetobacter baumannii. Patient is stable without respiratory distress. So presence of Acinetobacter baumannii could be a colonizer flora. Correlation with clinical features and radiological changes required for diagnosis of ventilator-associated pneumonia. This picture simply depicts that when we insert endotracheal tube, it impairs natural protection clearance system, and the tube gets colonized by bacteria. When these colonizers get aspirated into the lungs, only then they will cause infection. So key learning points from last 2 cases are a positive culture report not always indicate infections. We should be vigilant about organism isolated from non-sterile specimen like respiratory specimen. We should be able to differentiate between colonizer, contaminant and pathogen based on clinical correlation, thus avoiding unnecessary use of antibiotics. So now I would like to call Dr. Aman Mathur, Department of Pharmacology, for further discussion.
Good morning, please. My name is Dr. Aman Mathur. I'm from Pharmacology Department, second year resident. I will continue the discussion on AMSP by explaining the pharmacological approach to the antimicrobial prescribing. The AMSP goal, as outlined by Dr. Devendra, can be achieved pharmacologically through the following approaches: right drug, right dose, right route, right duration, de-escalation, streamlining, IV to oral, and designing dose regime using pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamic parameters. The first 3 strategies has already been discussed.
What do you mean by pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics?
So pharmacokinetics means what body does to the drug, and pharmacodynamic means what drug does to the body. And in case of antimicrobial stewardship, there is a new definition by WHO which suggests that what it not only does to the body, but it also does to the bug or the microorganism which is being found. So the first three strategies has already been discussed. I'll be focusing on IV to oral switch and designing dose regime using the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics parameters. My two objectives are IV to oral switch and optimizing dose regime for the time-dependent antimicrobial. I'll be taking beta-lactams as an example. I'll be illustrating the principle of IV to oral switch using a case of dysuria with fever. A 70-year-old male with uncontrolled diabetes mellitus presented with the fever past 2 days, dysuria, body micturition, left flank pain and urgency. Was diagnosed with complicated UTI and started empirically on IV ceftriaxone. After subsequent evaluation, the patient was clinically reassessed, and in this we see that after subsequent evaluation, patient was considered for switching antibiotic from IV to oral route based on the criteria by WHO. So was the patient stable? We see that is the patient tolerance of the oral medication available, ability to absorb the oral medication, and lastly the oral option of the drug is available or not. Then we'll review with the culture report. When the culture report came for the same patient, following all these drugs were found to be sensitive. So now I would like to ask the audience that should we consider to switch IV to oral in this particular case where our patient was stable, was able to take orally, and there was no malabsorption history with the patient, and yes, we have some options of oral availability for the IV drug. So should we consider IV to oral switch here? As the patient fulfill all the criteria, clinical criteria, we can consider the patient for IV to oral switch, and these are the recommended agents for the treatment of complicated UTI, as these two drugs are susceptible as per the culture report. And now we'll see that we have chosen cotrimoxazole with the bioavailability of 90%. I would like to tell that bioavailability is one of the very important key factors in choosing from IV to oral, and ideally the drug which has bioavailability more than 90% should be considered, and acceptance is nearly more than 75%. And lower bioavailability drugs can be allowed, but only with the oral dose compensation or adjustment. My second objective is the optimization of the dosage regimen for the time-dependent antimicrobials. I would like to use beta-lactam for the example. The antimicrobial pharmacodynamic characteristic depends on time-dependent and concentration-dependent, wherein time-dependent beta-lactams are the example, and the strategy is the infusion strategy, which can be either frequent, extended or continuous. Whereas in concentration dependent, I have two examples, aminoglycosides and fluoroquinolones, and here the large dosing and infrequent dosing can be considered as a strategy. This I would like to show by a curve that if we go with the traditional and intermittent infusion, then we can see that we all know that the time dependent antibiotics, the concentration above the MIC, which is denoted by the grey dotted line, is the very important aspect. So if we give traditional and intermittent infusion, then we can see the graph goes below the MIC nearly at the 4th hour. If we go with the prolonged one, it goes nearly at the 6th hour. So, and if we go with the continuous infusion, like 24-hourly infusion with the help of an infusion pump, then we can have the concentration above the MIC for upcoming doses, and this will reduce the interval dosing and will help in hospital stay duration, reduce the hospital stay duration of the patient. I would like to give and illustrate with the meropenem example, hypothetical meropenem example, where patient was given 500 milligram of meropenem. Firstly, it was given with the rapid infusion, 30 minutes. In this, the curve again came below the MIC at 4th hour. And if we see and use the extended infusion, then we can see the curve gets below at the 6th hour, which gives us a 2-hour additional time and coverage duration above the MIC. So, and to support this example, we have many theories around. In 2015, Blink study did not support the prolonged infusion of beta-lactams or or time-dependent antibiotics. But in 2017, 18, and 2021, there were some studies done which supported the prolonged infusion beta-lactam, and there was a special article.
Explain beta-lactam, please.
So beta-lactams are the antibiotics which has 4 different type of antibiotics: penicillin, cephalosporins, carbapenems, and monolactams. Beta-lactams are especially depend upon the beta-lactam ring cell. It is of 2 types. Either we find a 5 member ring or a 6 member ring, and they basically what they do, the whole they are classified like in 4 categories, but the mechanism of action for every one of them is that they inhibits the cell wall membrane system. So उससे क्या होता है सर, जब सेल वॉल के वो जो पीवीपीज जो हमारे प्रोटीन बाइंडिंग जो हमारे पेनिसिलिन बाइंडिंग जो हमारे प्रोटीन्स होते हैं सर,
क्या सेल वॉल में क्या क्या होता है? प्रोटीन होते हैं, क्या होता है सेकंड? सुगर मॉलिक्यूल्स, दे आर ग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड्स।
ग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड सर, पॉलीग्लाइकोपेप्टाइड, हाँ वो जी
ब्रेक दैट।
जी जी।
What is the role of beta-lactam?
So beta-lactam gets bind with the penicillin binding proteins and does not allow them to get adhered to the chains, and that's how the whole ring does not develop the cell wall, and that's why the bacterial the immunoorganism it gets swells, and then it dies. After swelling it dies. So that is how a beta-lactam works. And to support this,
Methicillin resistance.
I'm sorry sir.
Methicillin resistance.
Sir, a classification
beta-lactam and methicillin. डॉक्टर रजनी आप बताइए,
हाँ जी सर।
इन्हें बताइए methicillin का रेजिस्टेंस का beta-lactam के साथ कोरिलेशन।
मेडिसिन रेजिस्टेंस में क्या होता है, मतलब जेनेटिक बेस है। एक जीन होता है MET के नाम से, तो जो पेनिसिलिन बाइंडिंग प्रोटीन है ना, दे गेट ऑर्डर टू पेनिसिलिन बाइंडिंग P2A, तो वो ऑर्डर हो जाता है, तो सर एंटीबायोटिक बाइंड ही नहीं कर पाता, तो बाइंड नहीं कर पाता तो सेल वॉल से इनहिबिट नहीं कर पाता, दैट लीड्स टू एंटीबायोटिक रेजिस्टेंस।
A committee of American College of Clinical Pharmacy, British Society of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy and Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and many others committees sat on a floor, and they published this special article where they said that international consensus recommend for the use of prolonged infusion beta-lactam antibiotics. So again the very same question, and the answer is that we suggest that the prolonged infusion in beta-lactam antibiotics over the short infusion to reduce the mortality and increase clinical cure among the severely ill adults patient, particularly those with gram-negative infections, and some conditional recommendations are also there, very low certainty of evidence. So the key learning points to all this, sir,
Last line says the evidence in favor is of weak or moderate quality.
sir,
So this case is not yet proven beyond doubt.
yes sir,
Still a work in progress.
yes sir,
Standard infusion versus continued.
yes sir. So that is how a Blink theory trial 3 was done in 2023.
People should not go back from this class with the impression that it is proven beyond doubt.
Sir,
Sir, recently a Blink-3 study has been published.
sir here, the front row.
Sir, recently Blink-3 study has been published in JAMA, and that showed that there is a mortality benefit, and subsequently a meta-analysis has also been published that also gave a positive support to this theory. So now we have adequate evidence to support this concern.
The Blink theory was done in sir 23, and the meta study was done in 24. They both, and this article of the multi society was done in 22, which suggests they just suggested for not the every antibiotic but the beta-lactam especially, we can try and get prolonged infusion instead of short infusions. So the key learning points are maximum efficacy when concentration stays above the maximum minimum inhibitory concentration during dose for the time dependent drugs, which improves the better severe infections like pneumonia and sepsis. Thank you. I would like to call Shilpi ma'am on stage back. Thank you.
So finally, to summarize, we have spoken about the 5 Ds of clinical antimicrobial prescribing and streamlining the antibiotic, and we have talked about the 4 Ts of diagnostic stewardship. Now to combine all, we have 4 moments of antimicrobial stewardship. What are these 4 moments? The first moment is when the clinician encounters the patient and makes a clinical diagnosis. And there we have to ask a question that whether the patient is suspected of any bacterial infection and the patient requires any antibiotic. And that particular moment we need to understand all those points where we need to restrict the antibiotics. Like the cases of acute watery diarrhea or respiratory viral infections or maybe low grade fever and cases of acute febrile illness where we need to restrict the antibiotics. The second moment is attributed to the diagnostic stewardship, ordering the right test and all those things and taking and following the culture of sending the cultures. And at the same time, we simultaneously also decide about starting the empirical therapy, which we already discussed. How is it decided? Based on the patient severity, assessing the MDR risk factors and other parameters of patient, and we start the empirical antibiotic. The third moment is the second component, the the focus component, where we review the patient after 48 to 72 hours. We review based on the clinical reassessment and on the culture reports, other diagnostic reports, and then we decide based on the final diagnosis whether to stop, whether to continue, whether to escalate or de-escalate or switching from IV to oral therapy. And finally, one of the most important component, deciding on the duration. So duration is very important. There is a set guidelines for all infective syndromes, the duration, and for this the clinician has to daily review the patient and the clinical condition to minimize the duration as much as possible based on the patient's clinical condition. So with this, I would like to end this talk, and just to display, this is the AMSP committee of our hospital, and this is the picture of our last AMSP committee meeting.